In the last lesson, we learned how auto layout works with pinning at its basic levels. So now let's take a look at alignment, okay? Now, sometimes you want a view to stretch, like we saw with this example. You know, it stretches to fill the container that it is in. But obviously, that's not what you want to happen with every view that you put into your app. So in this lesson, we're going to take a look at how to set a fixed width and height, and then how to align that in a specific location, all right? So we're going to add another view controller here. I'm just gonna plop this right here, and let's select its view controller here and set it to the initial view controller. And then let's go ahead and add a UI view. So I'm going to grab a view right here in our object library. And just a reminder, I'm using the Command-Shift-L shortcut to bring up the object library. So I'm going to drag that view in here. And let's give it a background color. I'm going to go with a red color. You can pick whatever color you like. I'm just going to resize this a little bit and put it in the middle here. Okay, so what if we want this guy to stay the same size and smack dab in the middle, all right? How would we do that? So let's open up our constraints here. And instead of pinning, what we're going to do is first we're going to set a width and height, okay? So let's make this 150 by 150 and say add two constraints. Okay, so of the four things that we need to fix this in 2D space, we have added two, a width and a height, but now it needs to know where it should position the square horizontally and vertically, okay? And we want it right in the middle. And so we're going to use our alignment tool right here. So this says align, and if you click, then you'll see a whole bunch of options. Most of them are currently grayed out, all right? But we have this horizontally in container and vertically in container. And what this is going to do is it's going to center it horizontally and vertically. Over here, you can add an offset value if you wanted it to be, say, 30 points off of horizontal, then you could do that right here. But we'll just leave that to 0. Just select both of those and add two constraints. Okay, so you saw that it resized and set the horizontal and vertical constraints on it. Those are these blue lines that run straight through the middle of our square, and then you can also see the blue lines indicating the fixed width and height. Okay, so now if we rotate this, stays the same size and right in the middle of our screen. If we change screen dimensions, stays the same size and right in the middle of the screen. Perfect. So if we take a look at our align tools again, these two are probably the ones that you'll use the most, centering horizontally and vertically. Maybe not both at the same time, but one or the other or both. But these other ones up here, these require that you have two views to select, okay? So you may think that we need to add another view, but the truth is we already have a couple of views. We have this one, but we also have its parent view. So if you see over here in the document outline, we have our view here and this view here. Okay, so first thing I'm going to show you is how we can resolve auto layout issues. If we click down here on this button where it says resolve auto layout issues, then you'll see these options here, all right? So the top half is for selected views, okay? And right now I can reset to suggested constraints, I can clear constraints. And then we have down here, all views in View Controller. They're the same options, but the top applies to only selected views, and the bottom would apply to all views in this View Controller, okay? So with the red one selected, I'm going to remove its constraints. I'm going to say clear constraints, and you can see that now this doesn't have any more constraints. And I'm going to add back the width and height and add those two constraints. But now I'm going to hold Command and click on the view so that we have our two views selected. And I'm going to go back to our Align tool, and now you can see that all of these that were previously grayed out are now available. And so this would align our two views leading edges together. This would align the trailing edges, top edges, and bottom edges. Down here we have our aligning the horizontal centers, vertical centers, and first baselines. So let's go ahead and let's align our leading edges, and I'll say add one constraint. And you'll see that the red square just popped on over there so that the leading edge of both squares are now right in line. Now this isn't fully constrained, we've only supplied one of the requirements. We still need to tell where it should be in the vertical direction. This reminds me, I'm going to show you one other thing real quick. If you move a view that has constraints, you'll see this orange dotted outline, all right? So this is where it should be according to its constraints. And you can make it go back if you accidentally move something and you don't want to try to like move it back and get it where it's supposed to be. You can just press this button right here, which will update the frames. So clicking that, it will move it back to where it should be according to its current constraints. Now, if you move it, and that's where you want the constraints to be now, you can click over here on the auto layout issues, and then you can say update constraint constants. All right, so I'm going to open up our size inspector here, and we can see that we have these constraints, leading space. But if I click on this and open up and say update constraint constants, now we have a leading space to super view of 98. All right. I'm going to Command Z that and then update the frames, so that'll go back. So now we need to tell it where to be in the vertical space. And let's go ahead and just align that vertically in the container, add one constraint, and boom. Now we are fully constrained. Using our align tool, we aligned it with our super views, leading edges. We centered it vertically, and we set the width and height. Now, if we change orientation, for instance, we can see that we are still aligned with the leading edges and centered vertically. Okay, with our square selected, I'm going to go ahead and remove the leading space and the align center. And let's go ahead and with the square selected, also select our view again. And let's try out one of those other alignments. Let's go say top edges. We'll say add one constraint. And it pops up to the top. Now I'm going to delete that and select the other view, and I want you to go through and test out these other alignment constraints, okay? But for now, we're going to be done with that. I'm going to drag this down to the bottom, and right now the only constraints that it has is width and height. Okay, so now we're going to combine pinning and alignment, all right? So say we have this guy up here, and I want it to be pinned to the bottom, 20 points from the bottom, as well as centered horizontally, all right? So I want you to go ahead and give that a shot yourself, all right? Remember, you want to pin it 20 from the bottom and center it horizontally. All right, how'd you do? Hopefully you got that. Let's go ahead and do it together. I'm going to pin it 20 from the bottom. I'm going to add that constraint, and then I'm going to center it horizontally in the container. All right, so now this is fully constrained. Now let's add a second view, all right? Let's make things more interesting. I'm going to open up our object library, drag in a view, just kind of make that a rectangle here, and let's give it a background color, going to make it green. And now what we want to do is we want to pin it so that this one is always a certain distance above this one, okay? Let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to open up our constraint, add new constraints right here, and I'm going to click on this one right here, all right? So by default, this is going to look for the nearest neighbor, which is our red square, okay? So this number here, 42, that's 42 points from the top of our red square. Now, if for some reason you didn't want it to be constrained to the red square, you could click on this drop down here, and you have a couple of other options. You could constrain it to the view itself, okay, and that would be a distance of 212, or the safe area, which is the same, okay? But we are going to constrain it directly to the red square, and let's do 30 points and say add one constraint. So now it's going to be pinned from the top of the red square. Let's go ahead and give it a fixed width and height. Those width and height is fine, but now it's still missing the X position, all right? So we could center it also in the view, But I want to show you, if I hold Command and select both of these, what we could do is we could align the green one and the red one's horizontal centers, okay? So if I select this, then boom. Now this is centered with the red one, which is centered with the parent view. All right, so this is important because not everything has to be in relation to the parent view directly. It's kind of a chain. This has been fully constrained. Therefore, this can be fully constrained by relation to this one. However, if this one loses any of its full constraints, say we remove its align center X, now both of these are not fully constrained because the green one was depending on the red one to fulfill its horizontal constraint. Okay, so I'm going to, so again, seeing when I move it, we can move it back with update frames. And then I'm going to go ahead and add the alignment for horizontally back to our red one, and everything should move back and be good. All right, so your homework now is just to play around with these two views and become familiar with the pinning, alignment, and set widths and heights. In the next lesson's article, I have some screen examples I want you to try to replicate, all right? So have fun with that, and I'll see you in the next one.